Hello, friends. So I understand that some of you are working on this week's reading work. So I thought I would just kind of take you into how to write the read aloud activity, which I only want you to spend like 15 minutes on this. So let's take a look. All right, so here we are looking at our work for September 1st today. And number 7 says use figure 2.4 on page 43 as a guide to write a lesson plan for the assessed need. Students should internalize their own success criteria for independent reading this year. Okay, so I'm turning to page 43. 43 here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to stop sharing. Okay, so on page 43, there is a nice sample lesson plan there. So you can see here the assessed need. I have noticed that my students need what? So we're trying to imagine that when we meet our two T's, that we're going to notice that our student might need to figure out what their independent reading life is going to look like and what the success criteria for independent reading, figuring out who they are as a reader, their identity as a reader. Some of you talked about how, you know, after you got to middle school, like you stopped reading for enjoyment and for fun, or some people said like, you know, that while they've been in college, they haven't finished a whole book even because they're just trying to read to get the assignments done. So for the students that we're going to work with, we want them to start thinking about, you know, who are they as a reader and what do they want to read and what would bring them joy and what would they be really interested in? And so the criteria here, which we're going to practice with, is like, what does it mean to have success as an independent reader? What would bring us personally success? And so for the student to develop their own idea of that. So the standard assessed here is there's an independent reading standard for the Oklahoma, I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the right thing. Yeah, okay. For the Oklahoma reading English language arts standard, standard 8 is independent reading and writing. Standard 8 is independent reading and writing. And so that's why, you know, a lot of times if we think about high school, there's not a lot of time spent on independent reading for academic and personal reasons for extended periods of time. So we want the students to be reading for their own personal reasons. So that's why we're reading this short lesson plan for that. Okay. So we have our need to internalize their own success criteria for independent reading. The standard is independent reading. The text that you'll use, maybe you won't have a text for this. Maybe you're just going to use yourself as the text in modeling how you think about independent reading. The learning intention is to identify ways that we can determine what we like to read, when we read, how we find time for independent reading. Any of those things make sense. And the success criteria is that maybe by the end, your student will have 3 or 4 things that they can do, that they're going to do to move toward having a rich, happy, independent reading life. Okay. And so direct instruction. So what are you going to model? I will think aloud how I determine what my own independent reading life success is going to be. How do you do this? How do you figure out what books you like, when you're going to read, how you're going to read, how you're going to get your books? So this place, you might think aloud these kind of things, and then you're going to guide your students to ask these questions. Why is it important to have an independent reading life? In what ways is it, you know, what are the obstacles that we face to have our independent reading? Why, you know, like reading brings us joy. Why don't, you know, that's a good enough reason, I think, but whatever reasons you can think of. And the dialogic instruction is that the students might work with a partner to develop their own checklist for choice reading or independent reading, what kind of tools, and then assess at the end, you know, if what they need. Do they need access to resources? Do they need to do further research? Do they need to like look up book lists and explore authors? You know, these are some different things. Feedback opportunities. Obviously you're going to check in with your student when they do this, but if you were doing it whole class, you might be walking around, checking in, looking at their checklists, things like that too. So anyway, so I just want to kind of like talk you through, this is going to be pretty quick, just thinking about our independent reading lives and how we can help our students set their own personal goals with autonomy and agency in order to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to post this video right into the syllabus to help you.